Now, game week 12 might have only just begun, but there is so much to talk about already. So in today's video, we're going to be running through my early transfer targets ahead of FPL game week 13. Now, of course, before we dive into today's video, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe as we're trying to hit 25,000 subscribers on the channel, and it is only possible with your amazing support. As always, I like to take a look at the 11FI data for the next 5 to 6 game weeks, looking at their projected data. If you want to go and take a look at their website, then of course there will be a link in the description to that one. Let's start off first then with the clean sheet percentages over the next few weeks. Arsenal still top the list and have some absolutely cracking fixtures. So if you still are looking for a Gabriel replacement, maybe just going for a Timber or a Saliba could still be the most optimal route, with some great fixtures, of course, coming up. I'm filming this while the Manchester City game is taking place. However, after Liverpool's really disappointing performance today against Nottingham Forest, maybe looking at a Ruben Diaz or a Gabriel could also be a potential option. Some decent clean sheet projections coming up over the next few weeks. However, the downside I would say of these two is they don't hit defensive contributions. And also, you're playing into Pep's hands. Like, we're coming into winter, we're coming into the period where there are midweek Premier League rounds, Carabao Cup, and of course, Champions League rounds. There are going to be a lot of rotation, and Pep is a guy who will just randomly drop players. We've already seen that with Ruben Diaz once this season already. We've seen it with Gabriel as well. That would be my big concern, is there are just random benchings, random rotation, where you can't really predict it. So I probably wouldn't go for it. If you've already invested into Virgil van Dijk, I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't think, that's the end of the world. There still are some good fixtures, as you can see, coming up here with some decent projected data. However, today's performance was really disappointing and very, very frustrating to watch. Of course, if you did invest into that Liverpool side, I do think if they continue at this rate, though, we might potentially see Arne Slot get sacked, because they've spent big money. They're not winning games. They're not looking good either. And the fans are starting to turn on this side. So it might be not, a few more weeks before we maybe see a new manager in, so maybe just sticking it out with Virgil van Dijk might actually be the play. Chelsea, interestingly, they've got a difficult game in game week 13, however, have been very consistent at defending in recent weeks. Sanchez has kind of just been one of the best cheap goalkeepers that you can really go for outside of Raya. Just been ticking along very nicely. Trevor Chalobah as well is great for DEFCON. Also as well, just, kind of sneaking into some bonus points as well. The fullbacks for me, I probably wouldn't touch. You saw Reece James today get an early benching, so I probably wouldn't go for that one. Bournemouth, again, they have been conceding goals in recent weeks, but their numbers still do look pretty decent across the board, to be honest here. 35 and a 37 and then a 46. Senesi as well, he hits defensive contributions, also can pick up assists as well, as we saw today. So I think overall, he isn't too bad of a pick. Some people have been asking me about Manchester United defenders as well. Would I go for one? Personally, not for me. There is just too much in terms of their expected goals conceded, not to really warrant for me any sort of investment. That is probably my personal take on it, and probably somewhere where I wouldn't look. Maybe an area that people might want to start switching to is actually towards Nottingham Forest. They've got a great set of fixtures coming up. I think after this week's win and clean sheet, the 11FI numbers, when they do update ahead of game week 13, are probably going to see a probably uptick in terms of Nottingham Forest clean sheet numbers. So maybe trying to find a cheaper defender within there could be the play. However, the problem is, because of defensive contributions and how well they did last season, a lot of them are extremely overpriced for what they are. A lot of them really are probably between a 4.5 and a 5 million defender in terms of value. However, of course, within the game, they are priced at like a 5.5 million. So you're just not going to get any sort of worth out of them. Sticking with the 11-5 theme then, let's head over to the projected goals. We are seeing Liverpool top of this list, and I do think that will probably decrease. However, the 11-5 model is not only built off this season's results, it's built off obviously historical data, and throughout the past few seasons, Liverpool have just been one of the best sides within the Premier League. So a lot of the models you will see, and you might be confused why Liverpool are top in these models, well, they're not just built off the 12-game week season we're seeing right now. A lot of them are built off historical seasons. And like I said, Liverpool have been extremely dominant. If you cast your minds back to last season when we ran through the 11FI data, we also saw a similar trend with Manchester City. They weren't in kind of, Premier League or title winning form. However, most weeks they were still fancied by 11FI, Rob T data. It wasn't until towards the back end of the season where the model started to shift away from them. Oh, just what notched my mic over. So I think that's probably a trend we will see with Liverpool. They'll still be fancied in terms of projected models. They'll still look really, really good on the data sets. However, after watching that performance, I am probably going to use a little bit of recency bias when, of course, looking at Liverpool in terms of certain models and certain projected points. I would, of course, take every Liverpool player right now, whether that be Salah, Van Dijk, or obviously looking at this data with a pinch of salt, and obviously factor in their recent results and the way that Liverpool have been playing. We are seeing some great fixtures for City, of course, coming up. However, there might be weeks where, of course, the free hit could look at a decent potential option. I think a lot of people are looking either at game week 13, obviously betting heavy into Manchester City. That could be a decent strategy. Maybe looking at game week 15 or 17 as well could also be decent strategies going big on Manchester City. Also as well, people are looking for triple captaincy options with, of course, Erling Haaland. Game week 13, game week 15, and game week 17 could all arise as potential options there. Obviously, once we get past the Chelsea-Arsenal game, the fixtures for both of these two still look pretty decent, still look pretty good in terms of their projected goals, so definitely investable. Brighton as well have got some really smart pickups, Minter and Welbeck, with, of course, some pretty decent numbers coming up over the next few weeks. Newcastle's, once they get out of the way of game week 13, their run does seem to lighten a little bit, so maybe some free hit picks like a Walter Marder, a Gordon, and Murphy on the free hit definitely could be worth potentially taking a look at. We're seeing Palace's fixtures also come to an end around game week 15, and I do feel that will be a hop-off point where a lot of people do, of course, look to switch away from the Matetas, from the SARS, once, of course, their good fixtures have passed for me. If I was on a free hit for game week 13 as well, I definitely think Igor Thiago with the 2.09 projected goals here definitely would have to be a player I would be looking to consider heading into this game week. Now, before we dive into some individual players, of course, me and Golden Goal Fantasy Football have launched the FPL Cartel. Make sure you're getting yourself in there. It's our exclusive Discord server with an exclusive podcast, of course, some member-only competitions as well. You can join using the link in the description, completely free for 30 days as well. We've already got a really great community within there. It was great on match day today, great before the deadline as well, helping you guys out with your teams and stuff like that. So if you have any questions about your team, get yourself over to the FPL Cartel Discord, completely free for 30 days, just to come and try it out. So what are you waiting for? Sign up now. Okay, let's start off then with the almost man of game week 12. It is Igor Thiago, missed his second penalty. However, I think with the fixtures that Brentford have got coming up, we saw that with the 11FI numbers, there was some decent weeks in there up against your Burnleys, your Leeds, and your Wolves. There is some real potential for some other big double-digit hauls. Now, do I think after today's penalty miss, he is going to be taking off penalties? Probably not. I think he's converted enough already this season to probably stamp his seal of approval as, of course, the first choice penalty taker for this side. However, we did see when Kevin Schade missed earlier in the season against Sunderland that he was taken off him. So it will be interesting to see if, of course, he can retain his place as the Brentford penalty taker. However, look at the fixtures got coming up. He still looks a real danger from open play threat as well, not just with his penalty goals. And you factor in Burnley, the worst side for expected goals conceded, Leeds at home, an absolutely cracking fixture, and Wolves are the only side within the top 6 divisions of English football yet to pick up a win. So there's some absolutely cracking games in here for, of course, Thiago, if you were to invest in him. Now, some people as well might be arguing, well, they can't keep winning penalties. I've done some research on this and I've covered it in a few videos already this season. It was in the FPL Cartel. I've been banging on about it in there, and it is the penalty takers and how many, penalties certain sides are winning. So as you can see here, this is the penalties since the 21-22 season, the most penalties in a single season, and the ranking currently over that time frame. So the reason I've done since the 21-22 season is that is the year that Brentford were promoted to the Premier League. And look how many penalties they have won already so far in that short tenure of obviously being in the Premier League. 30 penalties. For a side, by the way, for the first few years of their kind of existence within the Premier League, were very much kind of, your mid-table relegation fodder side. They managed to go and win 30 penalties since then, right? That is the 4th best in terms of all Premier League sides, only behind, well, joint with Chelsea actually now. They also are 1 behind Liverpool and 3 behind Manchester City. An absolutely ridiculous ranking. It isn't even 4th, it's actually 3rd. I didn't see Chelsea run 30, I thought they were on 31. But yeah, Chelsea on 30 as well. Absolutely ridiculous. This is a side that not only knows how to score penalties, but knows how to consistently keep on winning penalties. So if you think Igor Thiago's won enough penalties for this season, they're probably going to dry up, they're not going to happen again, I'm just going to point this out. They are a side that know how to consistently keep winning penalties year after year. And you've got to just factor back into your mind some of the penalty takers, the brilliant penalty takers that they've had throughout the years as well. They've had Tony, they've had Mbeumo, and now they've got Thiago. They've just got a lot of players that know how to take the penalties and know how to win the penalties. And this doesn't surprise me because Brentford are a club that are built off betting data, built off models, and obviously looking for ways to obviously exploit the game with their long throws, their corners. And it doesn't surprise me to see them topping this list or getting very close to the top of this list for penalties won since their promotion into the Premier League. I'm not seeing anybody else in the community talk about this, and I think this is something that is really going under the radar, and I do actually think Brentford will continue to win a decent amount of penalties over the next few weeks and obviously progressing as well throughout the course of this season. So if Thiago's still on penalties, I do believe he is going to be a fantastic option with some great fixtures coming up, especially with, of course, the early substitution for Mateta. A lot of people, I think, over the next few weeks will, of course, be looking to offload him during that time period. The other option, and another club that does feature on this list with Brighton, with 29, again, another data-driven club, and their potential penalty taker, it's going to be Danny Welbeck. 7 Premier League goals. Again, he's just a guy that, for me, is really going under the radar right now. He's scoring plenty of goals, playing very, very good minutes as well, by the way. He's playing like full 90s nearly every single week. They've got some great fixtures coming up. I don't really feel fearful of Aston Villa. Probably Liverpool at the moment as well. Would you be surprised if Brighton went there and got a result? Probably not. Other than that, West Ham, Sunderland, these guys can be broken against. So I do think maybe looking at Danny Welbeck as well could also be a potential decent shout. He's just, like I said, going under the radar, going about his business. If we can get him confirmed as the Brighton penalty taker, again, with their very good record of winning penalties, very similar to Brentford, could be a real great asset at 6.5 million. Now, for me personally, I probably prefer Thiago over the next few weeks. I think obviously playing Burnley, Wolves and Leeds, some of the worst sides in the league, is better than what the fixtures that Brighton have got. I think as well with the penalty record that Thiago and Brentford have got, probably does edge it for me, and that is where I would go if I was in the market for a striker this week. I would select Thiago. However, if you want a guy who's massively going under the radar, could be the penalty taker for Brighton, I think Danny Welbeck is also a pretty decent shout. With Semenyo missing out today, I think a few people are, of course, going to be in the market for alternative midfielders. Now, I've obviously gone through my midfield selection, taken a look at some players I'm thinking about maybe bringing in if we get news that Semenyo is going to miss out on game week 13, and I'm going to run through them for you now. So first up is going to be Minter. Again, we've just went through the fixtures with Danny Welbeck. Definitely some pretty decent ones in there. I don't really feel fear of Liverpool right now with them in game week 16. So I actually probably think it is a pretty steady run. And this guy for me isn't kind of, you know, my traditional data looks good player. He's very much, when you watch Brighton, he's the guy that stands out. He is absolutely everywhere and so good to watch. He really, really is one of those players that does just massively pass the eye test. I think he's always going to be one of these players that maybe does underperform on his data, but when you watch him play and watch what he does for this Brighton side, he just honestly comes alive. He's absolutely electric and fantastic, and that is now kind of, you know, coming to fruition with, of course, very decent attacking returns. And also, as we head into this busy festive period, remember game week 14 being a midweek Premier League round, is also seeing very consistent minutes as well. So this guy does feel like a very good budget option at 6.1. Of course, if you are looking to downgrade from Semenyo, some great fixtures coming up, some good obviously, eye test catching performances, the data is a little bit of a worry, but I do feel like he could be one of these players that doesn't really need the data and is very much just you have to watch him perform and watch him play to see where, of course, how good he is, and of course, watch all the attacking returns that come from that. My other two options come from Nottingham Forest. They've been on a little bit of a renaissance in recent weeks. Obviously, their performance against Liverpool caught my eye today. Their performance against Leeds as well before the international break. They're getting things clicking in the right direction. And there's two kind of standout options, I would say, within the midfield right now. The first one is a little bit more of a premium pickup. It is going to be Morgan Gibbs-White. You look at the fixtures coming up. Brighton can always concede. Wolves, obviously, like I said, no win so far for them this season. Everton, Tottenham and Fulham. Again, you could very easily see Nottingham Forest probably scoring given the form that they are taking into game week 13. And Gibbs-White has managed to get himself a 10, an 8 and a 10 pointer over the past few weeks. It's very good numbers, again, for a player that isn't really being spoken about too much. The underlying data as well is pretty solid. And like I said, has really turned a corner a little bit under Sean Dyche. He looks like a very, very good option. I would say probably the sticking point for Morgan Gibbs-White is that 7.3 million price tag. When you've got guys like Minter or the other midfield option that we are going to show in a second from Nottingham Forest, obviously outperforming them in terms of points scored, it does make it very difficult to justify spending 7.3 million. I also haven't checked the corner record for this game, but I don't believe Gibbs-White did take any corners. So that again probably does downside him. No free kicks. Doesn't hit defensive contributions as well. They're probably the negatives. It is all just going to come from open play for Morgan Gibbs-White. However, the fixtures are there. The form is definitely there right now. So if you do fancy it, I understand it. For me, it is probably just that price point that is a little bit too difficult to probably justify going for a Gibbs-White ahead of a Minter or ahead of the next Forest player we're going to talk about, which of course is going to be Elliot Anderson. This is a guy, of course, we all owned at the start of the year, or was kind of flirting with him in our drafts. None of us ended up going for him, but he's done pretty much what we all expected him to do. He's been hitting those defensive contribution points, as you can see. 14 of his 50 points so far this season have come from defensive contributions. He's also started chipping away with some attacking returns as well, and there is some decent projected underlying data that also is very good for a 5.3 million. So if you are looking to, of course, take Semenyo down all the way to a budget enabling option, I do believe Elliot Anderson is going to be an absolutely cracking player for that. In recent weeks as well, he's really been stepping up his mark in terms of the defensive contributions. He's managed to hit it in the past 3 game weeks, and every single week is kind of flirting with it, especially at the start of the season. He was just hitting 11s. Very, very good for his CBIT numbers per 90. And like I said, he's outscored Gibbs-White, who is 2 million more, and I don't see there being too much difference between the two. Interesting to note as well, no Chris Wood, no Igor Jesus on the pitch. Who took the penalty? It was Elliot Anderson. That is something maybe noteworthy. Like I said, getting yourself a potential penalty taker when nobody else is on the pitch for 5.3 million, who can hit those defensive contributions, plays very good minutes as well, which is very important over this busy festive period for me. I want to be selecting players that, of course, feature lots and play plenty of minutes, can, of course, stay on the pitch for as long as possible. Don't have to worry about, obviously, them being benched or anything like that. Like I said, there is going to be some absolute chaos that does ensue around game week 14. So I think Elliot Anderson, for me, probably outpicks Gibbs-White. Does he outpick Minter? Probably not. The reason is because of these DEFCON guys, and when you don't really know when they're going to get their attacking returns, you end up probably playing them every single week, right? That's what I learned with Caicedo, is you kind of just have to play these guys every single week, because trying to pick out when they're going to score their goals or get their big returns is extremely difficult to do. But what they will do is provide you with a very, very good floor most weeks. So if you are looking for a guy that you are unfortunately just going to have to play every single week, who will chip away with points, has a very nice floor, then I do believe Elliot Anderson is probably your man, right? But if you are looking for a bit more of an explosive pick that you can rotate around, maybe with like an Igor Thiago, a Mateta, a Sarr, some of these other exciting picks as well, then I probably would look at Minter as the option and the go-to option for me personally. Right, let's finish up. Let's take a look at some defenders before we wrap up today's video. Now, to complete today's video, of course, if you didn't make your Gabriel transfer for whatever reason, I'm going to talk through some of the potential replacements you could go for. I think right now, before we see Arsenal play, I think they probably still look like one of the best investments to stick with. Looking at the projected clean sheet numbers over the next 5 to 6 game weeks, they are still top of that list. You have Timber, you have Calafiori. The problem with these two guys is they just don't hit those defensive contributions. Timber as well, his XGI numbers have really dropped off a cliff after a great start of the opening few weeks. You also have Saliba, who I haven't put on this list, but he also is pretty decent, but doesn't hit those defensive contributions. I do feel like it will just be kind of a case of steady Eddie, consistent point scoring from a lot of these guys, with Arsenal being, I would say, a more system-based defense, rather than, of course, a defense that is heavily reliant on one player. Factor in, obviously, last season as well, Gabriel did miss 10 games. During that 10-game spell, Arsenal conceded 10 goals and managed to keep 4 clean sheets across that period. So it was still a pretty prolific defense during those kind of numbers. I would say the difficulty is, and probably a little bit of a scouting mission for tomorrow, if you are still in the market for a defensive replacement, is looking how Timber performs, how Calafiori performs, and of course, how William Saliba performs. Maybe Maresca is going to be the guy, maybe somebody potentially else as well within that back line might be the guy to go for with defensive contributions, might be the threat from set piece. And without, of course, that game taking place so far, it is hard to kind of justify the best top looking pick. Now, some people might be tempted to go with Munoz. My problem with this, and you saw it in the 11-5 numbers, after game week 15, that game against Fulham, the Palace fixtures get extremely difficult. They've also got Europa Conference League and a Carabao Cup round on the midweek of Christmas. They've also obviously got the Premier League midweek round coming up, and that back line is playing a hell of a lot of minutes today. We saw Richards go down with a little bit of, like, it looked like cramp. Maybe it could be potentially a pulled groin and something like that. I don't think that will be the only defensive injury we do see with that back line. So if you are looking for, I would say, a more short-term replacement and willing to take them out when we get those AFCON transfers up, Munoz is absolutely brilliant because he can hit those defensive contributions. He's got great underlying numbers as well and is always prone to getting an attacking return. Mark Gahey is probably going to be your man for defensive contributions and maybe some flick-ons as well. We've already seen some flick-on jam from him so far this season. But Palace as well have also been a pretty consistent defense again. Their XG conceded numbers are looking pretty steady. So I think if you're looking for a short-term pick around game week 16, be willing to probably take some of these Palace defenders out, then I think they're also going to be, you know, pretty decent, valuable pickups. Obviously, Van Dijk is still on this list because Liverpool still have some good fixtures. Would I buy him right now after watching that Liverpool performance? No, I wouldn't. I would probably stay clear. However, if you've already invested into Virgil van Dijk and that Liverpool defence, I probably wouldn't do anything too drastic and I probably wouldn't take him out. De Ligt, for me, Manchester United just concede too many goals and are still not a great side for expected goals conceded, so probably wouldn't look to go there. City do have the fixtures, do have good projected clean sheet numbers, do have decent underlying numbers. However, as you can see here, doesn't really hit defensive contributions. And for me, with a lot of games coming up, we'll just see a random benching at one point this season. Spurs and Van de Ven, I mean, we didn't even speak about them on the 11-5 numbers. They're just not there. He's got very lucky with some big double-digit hauls from goals. I would not be expecting that from him every single week. So again, probably would end up on my avoid list for this week. The two options that I probably would be considering, Senesi and Anderson, like the next two for Bournemouth are great, can hit defensive contributions again, 80%, the best on this list so far. So even if they do concede, you are going to come away with probably a 3 to 4 pointer. So it's not the end of the world when you are paying, you know, just 5 million for that. The other option though is going to be Anderson from Fulham. Again, hit defensive contributions today for 4.5 million with that Richards injury. For me, does probably feel like one of the best defensive budget enabling assets right now within the game at 4.5 million. Those are the defenders that I would potentially be considering if I was in the market for a Gabriel replacement. I wouldn't say there's any kind of clear ones. Probably for me, it will be just a scout for the Arsenal game tomorrow. Look at what options are, of course, looking good over that time period. See what options are hitting the defensive contributions. See what options are maybe the threats from the set pieces, because Arsenal are the best side for XG set play in the league. That is where my focus would be looking at tomorrow as a potential scouting mission. Of course, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you're liking, commenting, and subscribing. Make sure you're getting yourself in the FPL Cartel Discord as well. Thank you very much for watching today, ladies and gentlemen, and good luck in game week 13.